What's up? Welcome back to the Metalhead Car Show. A little while ago, I did a video on American cars that aren't American, and both you guys seemed to like it, and it was a lot of fun to make. So today we are doing part 2. 5 cars not mentioned in the first video that are from American manufacturers that were not sold in America. Fairly straightforward, right? And don't worry, if you recommended a car for me to look into in the last video, there's enough cars here to do a part 3. If you want to see a part 3, watch to the end, like the video, and I'll guarantee you there will be a part 3. But for now, let's get right into it. In 2010, Chevy made the Orlando. The Orlando is going to be a 4-door hatchback sold in Canada, South America, Europe, and multiple Asian countries, but not America. The Orlando started life with a 1.8-liter 4-cylinder making almost 140 horsepower, and it was eventually upgraded to a 2.4-liter naturally aspirated 4-cylinder making about 180 horsepower. Yeah, this is an exciting car to start the video off on. The first generation Orlando went from 2010 to 2017. 2018 got an all-new generation, which looked way better, and got a neat little engine that was a turbo 3-cylinder that made about like 156 horsepower, which truthfully isn't bad. It's a really good 3-cylinder. And as of the second generation, it was solely sold in China and nowhere else. As a Canadian, I can say these things were around. They did not sell that well ever. In Canada, they sold in 2012, 13, and 14. And by 2014, they failed to sell 1,400 models. So it ended production in Canada. As in 2015, they only sold 31 models in Canada. It's a car, it exists. It seems like a bigger HHR, but let's move on to the next car. Go to Brazil for a big one, the Ford F-1000. The Ford F-1000 started life as a 5th-gen Ford F-150, which came out in 1967. In America, the 5th-gen F-150 lasted 6 model years before being killed off, but it was sent to Brazil, turned into the F-1000, and went all the way to 1992. The first big change to the F-1000 was the engines. The first primary V8 option you got was a 272 cubic inch, so a 4.6-liter V8. Along with that, you had a 6-cylinder, a 4-cylinder in a F-150, and you had some turbo diesels. Along with the 1 or 2 engines, Brazil Ford actually designed to run on ethanol. What makes the F-1000 kind of cool is the fact that it didn't just try to be a knockoff F-150. There's various different body styles went on this. There was things that kind of made it look like a little bit of a Bronco went on it. You had van bodies went on it. You had full cab F-1000s that we didn't quite get the exact same thing. Theirs looked a lot bigger. So it's really kind of interesting to see how the design changes went with the F-1000 compared to what we got in North America. The F-1000 is pretty cool. I think if you were to import one of these to North America, you should go as weird as possible. There were standard looking F-1000s, but if you're to get one of these, get one with like that van front end on it, just so you have something that nobody else has seen here. It's weird, but it's pretty cool. Next up, and sticking in Brazil, the Brazilian Dodge Charger. Now in the last video, I did reference this car, but I wanted to look at the Australian Chargers due to I thought it was a bit cooler. But today we're giving the Brazilian Dodge Charger its 2 minutes of fame. The Brazilian Dodge Charger lasted from 1971 to 1978. In the time of its production, it was using the A-body platform, primarily from the 1971 Dodge Dart. When it came out, it was using a Slant 6 as the base model engine that was making 15 more horsepower than the American specs due to a little bit of tinkering with its intake system, along with the RT, which is using a whopping 198 horsepower 318 V8. Frankly, I wonder with these why they didn't get like one extra engine option. Why wasn't there a 340 or something like that? But they got like the most gutless 318 possible. What makes this Charger kind of cool and interesting though is it has a really unique front end on it, not like anything Dodge has ever used before, and truthfully it looks like more of a Pontiac than it does Mopar. But that rear end is like the nicest Dart rear end Dodge ever used, and frankly it looks great. As easy as it is to kind of poke fun at this car, I think it is generally very cool that Dodge was importing these to Brazil and to Australia. But not just importing them, but also making these special edition cars that North Americans didn't get. And yes, they might have weird engines and they might be a little bit underpowered, but I think it's just simply cool that they happened at all. It would have been easier not to do it, but not just did they do it, but they gave it styling cues and tunings that was special and unique to them. So, very cool car. But now, we're off to Europe. In 1993, Ford Europe wanted to design something new, small, and sporty for the European market. Starting in 1996, the Ford Puma was designed to be a two-door little coupe for the European market. Now, the base model engine only had 90 horsepower, and the best it really got for a little while was about 150 horsepower. But the Puma also weighed a bit over 2,200 pounds, or it was like 2,280. This thing was light. You did not need much power for it. And truthfully, these things look awesome. I would love to have one of these things over here. Now, the Puma was only in production from 1997 to 2002, and around the end there was the Puma ST160, being an upped, more performance-oriented version of the Puma. And before the Ford Puma's death in 2002, Ford actually had this in rally racing. So it's really cool to see that this wasn't just a disposable hatchback Ford is making. They actually put time and effort into it and wanted to do more with it, by both giving it a performance version and taking it racing. It's a cool little car, but unfortunately had the same fate as the Mitsubishi Eclipse, as when it was brought back about 15 years later as a SUV. And they put the Ford Puma's face on it, which is hilarious, because at that point it'd be like just a forgotten, obscure car from Ford. But they slapped its face on this SUV, so it looks like it's saying, just let me die! Sick little car. And now we're ending off with the last car coming from Canada. In 1962, GM brought out the Acadian. The Acadian was a GM side brand that was built exclusively for Canada. The Acadia was made on the Chevy 2 platform, using very similar engines to it. Using your straight 6s, using your 327s, and using up to your 396. Much like the Charger we mentioned earlier, the Acadian was a GM car that was already being made, restyled to look a little bit differently for the Canadian market. And with that, they're kind of neat. Now, the Acadia was made to counteract Autopact. Autopact was made to prohibit the sales of very particular US vehicles in Canada, so having this as its own Canadian brand could counteract that. And GM made it from 1962 to 1971 before they discontinued it for a couple of years, before they brought it back in the 1980s as a restyled Chevy Chevette. Frankly, you should have just kept it, we're good. Neat little car, but unfortunately it did have kind of the same fate as the Dodge Charger. Started really cool, turned into a hatchback nobody wanted. So anyway, that's 5 American cars that were not sold in America. But I want to know, what do you think? Do you want a part 3? And if so, what car should I use in part 3? Let me know in the comments. Thank you all so much for watching. Like, subscribe if you enjoyed what you've seen. I tend to post on Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday, and I'll see you later.